Good morning, everyone. This is Saurabh, and I am your trainer for performance testing, and I am on behalf of Uplatz. So, speaking about our last class, like whatever we have discussed, I'll just try to project you and tell you, give a small hint so that you will be aware of that particular session. So, on our last class, we had discussed about uh, NFR gatherings, like what are the approaches and how will we perform NFR, and what is the purpose of that particular NFR, and many more. Like if you haven't understand that particular or haven't watched that particular session, I would highly refer go watch that video and then come back to this session so that you will be understanding the proper performance test cycle phase. So for the today's agenda, I will be telling you the in-depth detail of test planning. How can you plan the test and how can you prepare the test document? I have a test document template, and even I'll also explain you what will be the approaches and why test planning is needed and many more. So without wasting much time, let's get started. So what is the test planning? Okay, so we'll start with our activity. So what is like what is performance test planning? Do you have any kind of idea or understanding about test planning? So if not, I will try to proceed with my understanding. So performance test planning is a process to define a roadmap for conducting successful performance testing. Roadmap for conducting successful performance test planning. So this is one of the phase which comes after NFR gathering. This is the third phase of performance test cycle in PTLC, which you can refer as PTLC. It comes after NFR gathering phase. Okay, so this is one of the important phase of the performance test cycle, whereas performance tester prepares an uh, approach to test a system or an application. So basically you can write performance tester can should prepare a test plan document to test a system or an application. For this, a performance tester should prepare a test plan document to test a system or an application. So such approach is based on the outcome of like performance tester refer the risk assessment phase uh, and NFR phase and create a test plan document. So after collecting all the details and during the call via from the client, he just noted down in separate like, and he also prepares a risk assessment document which already will be there, like what are the critical components will be involved during the test, and what are the like architecture, and in the NFR he will be mentioned like in the previous class as I have already mentioned, like he'll collect all the matrices like number of user load, how many in 1 hour, how much time, what is the throughput, what is the TPS, everything he'll be collecting, and he will try to build a overall test plan document. Like in this particular plan document, what all details it will be there. I'll also mention when I explain a test plan document template. In that you'll come to know. So basically, who prepares this test plan document? Not all the person prepare this test plan document. Basically there will be some point of contact or an in charge person who has been given with a responsibility to prepare this type of document. So always a manager or a test lead has a responsibility to prepare a practical performance test plan with the help of available information which he has collected during the risk assessment and NFR gathering phase. So mostly test manager or test lead prepares this document after collecting with the help of information which has been collected in the earlier phase of PTLC. So earlier phase which is comes like there is two more phase which comes before test planning, which is NFR gathering, and one is risk assessment. After collecting all the details from the client and stakeholders, he tried to project, and he used to also refer the documents, and then he basically prepares a test plan document. So most of the work of preparing this test plan document is involved with test manager or test lead. So because this is very critical thing, and everything needs to be projected in a particular document so that the stakeholder can go through this particular test plan document and give a sign off for the next phase. So in this particular test planning, we also in this phase performance tester also provide a detailed knowledge on PT scope, performance testing scope, and execution cycle, volumetrics, and script execution, script script design. So whenever this phase comes, like how a performance tester approach on this particular phase, like how he try to proceed with the phase and prepare the particular test plan document. Let's see. Okay, so what will be the approach for a performance tester? Like, first of all, he will be describing the non-functional requirement and scope, and he has to map the non-functional requirement with non-functional test. Like, you can tell, like, in the previous class when we referred a document, I'll even open for that for a reference so that you can understand. So, so this is the non-functional requirement detail. So you can see there are five business process, and this five business process we have the number of user load and all, but each business process might have number of NFR requirements. Like for the first business process, there is like 100 active users. We wanted to know the performance of a user load, then performance responsiveness. Like wanted to know like the request which are we the client is processing should get response within a 5-second SLA, and number of like the for the first business process it should not give out any CPU spike, or it should achieve a throughput or it TPS. Everything there is like related to this particular business process. Like a business process can have multiple NFR requirements, like coming to performance, scalability, adaptability, and performance, everything. So he has to map the NFR requirements with non-functional test. Like this is the NFRs, and what type of test do we need to perform this kind of do we need to achieve this kind of requirement. So he has to map like so basically this NFR user load, like it tells us that we have to test a load test for this particular NFR. So for achieving this particular requirement we have to do a load test, and if it if the application is able to achieve support 100 active users, then definitely this type of requirement is a pass requirement. So approach. um, Describe the Describe the scope and the requirement of the non-functional desk. Just a second. Describe the non-functional requirements and scope. So performance tester have to Map the non-functional requirement with the non-functional test. Let's take a screenshot. So we have seen like so basically for this particular NFR1 we need what type of so he has to map like this NFR map one is comes under load type of test. So he has to map this like what all type of test it is needed. So again he has to develop a strategy for test execution, like how much duration in a particular sprint or a release, what type of test we need to do perform for this kind of application and what all. So he has to build a test strategy document for that. Develop a strategy document. So develop a strategy planning and document for the execution and decide the number of execution cycle as per the project timelines, like how many times he has to do perform this particular execution cycle. He has to like suppose to ensure the stability and all, we have to make sure like we have to perform load test for 3 times, and we have to check the like compare the baseline with the benchmarking result, whether if it achieves the particular test on like after comparing all the results. If we see that after comparing we found out that the test results are okay and it is not deviating, then we should focus on our next phase, like next execution or next type of test, which can be soak or stress depending on the requirement. So he has to define the entry and exit criteria of the test, and also he needs to decide the number of execution cycle as per project timelines. So he should also collect the information about the environment scaling. So environment scaling is nothing but like suppose in last year, suppose our application is can support up to 1,000 users. And in this particular year, what are the client's requirement? Suppose if they wanted to scale their architecture and components up to 3,000 user support, active users count, then definitely they had to do some changes in their architectural and modify their code and optimize their code. Then the application will be auto scaled depending on the users. So he has also needs to collect that particular environment scaling details, and also he has to mention like how much, what type of test data is needed, test data preparation. And once again after coming this, he has to like assume, like he has to mention the risk assessment, like if there are any kind of shared environment, if anything is we are not it is not given to us during the type of test, then he has to mention this kind of risk, like this particular risk is involved because this all things are not given or not provided. So we are just taking this particular risk and continuing with our performing our test. Assumption, issue, and dependency. Performance testing timelines. So, like in the earlier phase, I think we have collected many of the details from the client and the stakeholders, and we have also asked number of questions like what are the requirements and all. And after that, like other information like environment detail, test data may require some of the meetings or calls or email communication if the performance test environment is scaled down. Then NFR must be up, like suppose in case if your client wants that we have to scale down our architecture components, or we have to scale down with respect to production environment, then the NFR must be updated according to the scale down, the percentage of the environment. And we should not extrapolate the results. Whatever the results we are getting, we should show and that matrices to the client, because if we try to do perform any kind of extrapolation, and if we get any kind of errors in production environment, definitely they'll come back to you, and it will be a very hard task. They will raise a lot of question, and you will be the main culprit for this. So you should not extrapolate the results. So, in addition to the risk and assumption associated with the scale down testing, and extrapolation must be properly documented. So, I wanted to highlight the dependency along with the point of contact. Like, suppose let's take a performance test environment, it should be ready before the performance test plan is finalized. Like, whenever the test plan is finalized, it should be ready before that and particular environment. Once the performance test plan is finalized, then share with we have to share this particular test plan document. Let's take an example. Performance performance test environment should be ready before the test plan.